Hey, welcome. Tonight, we're taking a step way back in time, not to grand palaces or shining temples, but to a world still being shaped, full of gods, monsters, and brave mortals trying to find their place. This is the beginning of Greek mythology, the real beginning. You'll hear how everything started from nothing, how the gods rose, and how their stories still echo in our world today. We'll meet fearless heroes, lovers who challenged fate, and strange beings born from sea foam, shadows, and pure willpower. If stories like this help you relax or sleep, go ahead and like the video or subscribe, but only if it actually helps. Also, feel free to share in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. It's comforting to know we're all falling asleep to the same stories, scattered across the world. Now take a deep breath. Dim the lights. Let the ancient voices whisper. Let's begin. At the very start, before stars, before cities, before even time, there was nothing. Just chaos. Not chaos like we usually think. No yelling, no noise, no mess. This was pure, silent emptiness. Endless space. Still. Waiting. And then, from that stillness, something stirred. The first to emerge was Gaia, Earth herself. Solid, steady, massive. The foundation for all life to come. Next came Tartarus. A deep, dark pit far below everything. It wasn't really a place you could visit. More like the bottom of existence. Then came Eros, not the cute winged version. This was the first spark of attraction, the force that pulled things together. Love, yes, but also gravity, chemistry, connection. More followed. Darkness, Erebus. Night, Nyx. And from night came light, ether, and day, Hemera. But most important of all, Gaia gave birth to Uranus, the sky. He stretched across her like a blanket full of stars. Together, Earth and sky became the first couple. And like many couples in mythology, things got complicated quickly. They had kids, 12 of them, 6 sons, 6 daughters. The Titans, each one was unique. Oceanus wrapped the world in rivers. Hyperion carried the sun. Themis stood for law and justice. Mnemosyne held memory. They were strong, massive, mysterious, born to shape the world. But Uranus? He wasn't thrilled. Maybe they scared him. Maybe he just didn't want to be a dad. So, he shoved them back inside Gaia. Literally. Yes, that's as awful as it sounds. Gaia, in pain and rage, came up with a plan. She forged a giant stone sickle and reached out to her sons, asking for help. One by one, they stayed silent, until she got to Cronus, the youngest. Cronus was sharp, calm, and patient. Dangerous combination. He took the sickle, hid in the shadows, and waited. When Uranus came close again, Cronus struck. With one brutal move, he castrated his father and tossed the remains into the sea. From the blood that hit the ground, new beings were born. Furies, giants, and more. And from the sea foam where the flesh landed, something unexpected rose. Aphrodite, fully grown, glowing, the goddess of beauty and love. Only Greek mythology could turn that kind of horror into a supermodel. With Uranus gone, Cronus took the throne. He freed his siblings from Gaia and ruled over the world during what's now called the Golden Age. It was a peaceful time. Humans had just appeared. They lived without sorrow, and the gods mostly stayed out of their way. But one thing lingered, a curse. Uranus, with his final breath, or whatever the sky uses to speak, warned Cronus. One day, your child will overthrow you. Cronus had just done exactly that to his own father. So he believed it, and he decided to stop it before it happened. How? He ate his children. Yes, That's what he did. He married his sister Rhea, which is normal in mythology. And every time she gave birth, he swallowed the baby whole. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon, all gone, one by one, into the dark inside their father. Rhea was devastated. 5 babies gone. She couldn't take it anymore. So when her 6th child was born, Zeus, she made a move. She wrapped a stone in baby blankets and handed it to Cronus. He didn't even check. He just swallowed it. Meanwhile, the real baby Zeus was hidden away on the island of Crete. He was raised in a cave, fed by mountain nymphs, and nursed by a magical goat named Amalthea. Zeus grew up strong. He heard stories of his lost brothers and sisters, gods trapped inside their father. And as he grew, so did his purpose. When he was ready, Zeus left the cave, disguised himself, and entered Cronus's court as a humble servant. With the help of Gaia, his grandmother, he slipped a powerful potion into Cronus's wine. It was bitter, old, volcanic. Cronus drank it, and then he started to cough, then gag, and finally vomit. Out came 5 fully grown gods and goddesses, along with one very well-wrapped rock. Now reunited, the 6 children of Cronus stood together for the first time. And they were angry, very angry. The war that followed would last 10 years. A clash between the old gods, the Titans, and the new, led by Zeus. But that is a story for the next part. The world was tired. The sky no longer burned as bright. Even the stars seemed to flicker like they were out of breath. It was during one of these weary nights that Gaia, Mother Earth herself, stepped in. Though she had brought both Titans and gods into the world, Gaia had grown tired of the endless war tearing it apart. The ground split too often. Rivers flowed the wrong way. Even humans, those fragile little beings just starting to figure things out, were beginning to notice. The seasons were off. The winds felt confused. One night, Gaia appeared to Zeus in a dream. "If you want to win," she whispered, "you must go deeper." So Zeus listened. He traveled down, far below the mountains and the roots of trees. He descended into Tartarus. Not just a deep place, but the deepest. A dark, echoless abyss where even shadows feared to stretch too far. It wasn't a place meant for visitors. In Tartarus, ancient beings older than nightmares were chained in silence. And it was there, at the bottom of everything, that Zeus found them. The Centimanes, 3 massive brothers. Each had 50 heads and 100 arms. They were terrifying, yes, but not evil. They were raw, chaotic power locked away by Uranus long ago, just because he didn't know what to do with them. And, to be fair, shaking hands with them was kind of a logistical nightmare. Chained beside them were the Cyclopes, giant one-eyed blacksmiths. They had once forged storms and fire, but now sat in darkness, their forges cold. Zeus didn't hesitate. He broke their chains. The air trembled as they stood. The Centimanes stretched their many limbs. The Cyclopes blinked into the light. They didn't speak much, but they knew who Zeus was. And more importantly, they knew what needed to be done. In return for their freedom, the Cyclopes gifted Zeus 3 weapons, one to each of his siblings. For Zeus, the thunderbolt, a crack of raw sky, power that could split mountains in half. For Hades, the helmet of invisibility, a shadowy veil that let him move unseen through both battle and underworld. For Poseidon, the trident, a weapon that could shake the seas and split the earth. Armed with these gifts, the war truly began. The Titans were strong. They had ruled the world for ages. But the Olympians, Zeus and his siblings, now had the weapons and the allies to challenge them. The Centimanes hurled boulders the size of cities. The Cyclopes forged weapons mid-battle. Zeus threw lightning like it was a second heartbeat. The earth cracked, oceans boiled, mountains fell and rose again. For 10 years the battle raged. Titan against God, old power against new. The sky itself felt torn. Sometimes day wouldn't come. Other times the moon would rise in the middle of the afternoon. And still no side could win. Then Gaia whispered again. "Use the earth," she said. "Let it move through you." So the Olympians changed their tactics. Poseidon struck the ground with his trident, splitting hills and calling tidal waves. Hades moved through shadows, pulling Titan soldiers into the depths. And Zeus, he aimed not just at bodies, but at the heavens themselves. One final bolt. It roared across the sky like a scream of fate. It hit Cronus directly, knocking him from the battlefield. The Titans faltered. Their strength came from Cronus, and without him, they were shaken. The Olympians moved quickly. The Centimanes and Cyclopes rounded up the defeated Titans. One by one, they were bound. But instead of killing them, Zeus did something different. He had learned something from watching his father and grandfather before him. Killing power only invites more power. So he locked the Titans away, deep in Tartarus. Stronger chains, heavier silence. The Centimanes stood guard. And so the war was over. Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades stood together and divided the world. Zeus took the sky, Poseidon took the sea, and Hades, he took the underworld. The earth itself, the mountains and forests and valleys, would remain shared territory. No one god would own it. It belonged to all and to none. But make no mistake, Zeus was king now, the ruler of Olympus. His throne rested high above the clouds, surrounded by lightning and marble. The age of the Titans was over. The age of the Olympians had begun. With the Titans locked away and the world divided, peace finally settled, at least for a while. Zeus stood tall as king of the gods, ruling from Mount Olympus, a shining palace hidden high in the clouds, where storms curled around golden pillars and gods walked in marble halls. But Zeus couldn't rule the world alone. The Olympian order needed more than thunder and fear. It needed balance. It needed family. And so, one by one, more gods and goddesses took their place among the stars. There was Athena, goddess of wisdom, strategy, and skill in battle. She was born fully grown from Zeus's forehead, wearing armor and holding a spear. No childhood, no nonsense, just brilliance and resolve. She was calm, sharp, and rarely lost her temper, unless someone dared question her intelligence. She preferred logic over shouting and could outthink most gods before breakfast. Then came Apollo, the god of the sun, music, poetry, healing, and prophecy. He radiated confidence, maybe too much. With his golden lyre and perfect hair, he was adored by many, envied by others, and never short on opinions. He could soothe pain or call down plague, depending on his mood. His twin sister, Artemis, ruled the moon, the wilderness, and the hunt. She roamed forests with a bow in hand, followed by a pack of loyal hounds. Protector of young girls and wild creatures, she rejected the company of men and reacted badly if disturbed, especially during her bath. Then there was Ares, god of war. Where Athena represented strategy, Ares was chaos. Rage, blood, clashing swords, that was his language. He was loud, reckless, and often injured in stupid ways. Even Zeus found him annoying. So did most of the other gods. But on the battlefield, he was a storm you didn't want to face. Next came Hephaestus, the god of fire and the forge. Born with a limp and thrown from Olympus by his own mother, he crashed into the sea and was raised by gentle sea spirits. But instead of growing bitter, he learned to shape beauty from pain. With calloused hands and a brilliant mind, he forged the weapons of gods and built machines that walked on their own. He even made the palaces of Olympus shimmer with impossible design. He may have limped, but he was a master of creation. Aphrodite followed, the goddess of love, beauty, and desire. She could make gods stutter and mortals crumble with just a glance. Born from sea foam, she arrived already dazzling. But she wasn't just about romance. She knew how to manipulate, to charm, to win without lifting a sword. And though many sought her affection, she often chose chaos over comfort. Hermes, god of travel, luck, and mischief, zipped into Olympus like a breeze with too much energy. He had winged sandals and a clever grin. He could steal your sword, sell it back to you, and leave you thanking him for the deal. Messenger of the gods, guide to the dead, and inventor of lies, Hermes was fast, funny, and never fully trustworthy. But he always got the job done. Hestia, goddess of hearth and home, kept things grounded. She didn't seek glory. She kept the fire burning, the meals warm, and the peace in family meetings. While other gods argued and fought, Hestia made sure Olympus stayed livable. And finally, Dionysus, god of wine, madness, ecstasy, and parties that got way out of hand. He could turn water into wine, joy into chaos, and silence into dancing. You never quite knew where he stood, except probably on a table. Together, these gods and goddesses made up the Olympians. Each had their strengths, each had their flaws, and like any family, they fought, made up, laughed, plotted, and occasionally turned each other into animals. As Olympus grew more organized, so did the world below. Humans began to multiply. They built cities, farmed land, lit fires. They offered prayers and sacrifices, hoping the gods above were listening. And the gods were watching. Among them was Prometheus, a titan who hadn't fought in the Great War. He had sided with the Olympians and had earned their respect. But his loyalty was not to gods. It was to humans. Prometheus saw how weak and cold they were. They had no claws, no fur, no natural weapons. He felt pity and love, so he gave them a gift, fire. He stole it from Olympus, hid a flame in a hollow stalk, and carried it to Earth. With fire, humans could cook, forge, stay warm, survive. Changed everything. But Zeus was furious. He had forbidden this. He believed fire belonged to the gods. Humans were meant to stay small, dependent. Prometheus had disobeyed him directly and publicly. So Zeus made an example of him. Prometheus was chained to a rock on a lonely mountain. Each day, an eagle would come and tear into his flesh, devouring his liver. Each night it would grow back, an endless punishment for a single act of compassion. Still, Prometheus didn't cry out, didn't ask for mercy. He watched the smoke rise from human fires and smiled because the world had changed, and Zeus could not unchange it. Prometheus gave fire to humans. He gave them survival, but he also gave them something the gods didn't plan for: freedom. Fire was more than warmth. It was invention. It was thought. It was rebellion, and Zeus hated it. The punishment of Prometheus wasn't enough. He wanted humans to learn a lesson, a big one. So he came up with something special, something cruel and beautiful. He told Hephaestus to shape a woman, the most stunning creature the world had ever seen. Every curve, every breath, every hair, perfect, made from clay and divine fire. Each god gave her a gift. Aphrodite gave her beauty. Hermes gave her clever words and a silver tongue. Apollo gave her music and grace. Athena gave her curiosity. They named her Pandora. It means all gifts. But one more gift remained. Zeus gave her a box, or more accurately, a jar, sealed tight, beautiful, but never to be opened. He gave her to Epimetheus, Prometheus's brother. Now, Prometheus had warned him, never accept gifts from Zeus. But Pandora was too lovely, too kind, too alive. So Epimetheus took her in. For a while, everything was fine, until the curiosity Athena had given her started to stir. That jar, what was inside? Why was it forbidden? One day, while Epimetheus was away, Pandora couldn't take it anymore. She opened the lid just a crack, and the world changed forever. Out came misery, pain, sickness, war, jealousy, famine, madness, death. Like smoke they spread, fast, invisible, everywhere. By the time she slammed the lid shut, it was too late. Almost everything had escaped, except one thing. At the bottom of the jar, barely visible, something small still trembled. Hope, that was all that remained. Pandora stared at it, unsure if she should let it out. Was hope a gift or a trick? Another curse? She released it, and hope drifted into the world, soft and stubborn. It didn't undo the pain, but it gave people a reason to go on. Zeus had tried to break the spirit of humans, but somehow, in the end, he'd given them the one thing that made them truly dangerous, the belief that things could get better. As time passed, the gods became more involved in mortal lives. Some disguised themselves and walked among humans. Others stayed far above, watching like stars. Mortals began to build temples, make offerings, tell stories, and the gods began to choose favorites. Some humans were blessed, others cursed. One man in particular stood out. His name was Deucalion. He was the son of Prometheus, clever, kind, and quiet. He loved knowledge more than gold, and peace more than power. His wife, Pyrrha, was the daughter of Pandora. Together, they were thoughtful, honest, and devoted. But the world around them had become twisted. Humans had changed. They lied, they stole, they killed, and Zeus had had enough. He decided to start over. So he sent rain. Not a drizzle, not a storm, a flood. One that swallowed villages, forests, entire mountains. Most people didn't even know what hit them. They just vanished beneath the waves. But Prometheus, still chained, still watching, managed to warn his son. "Build a chest," he told Deucalion. "A great wooden box, strong enough to float." Deucalion did as he was told. He and Pyrrha climbed inside. And when the flood came, they were carried away, two small lives bobbing in a sea of silence. For days, the world was water, endless gray, no birds, no trees, just sky and sea. And then stillness. The rain stopped, the clouds drifted apart, and the chest came to rest on a mountaintop. When Deucalion and Pyrrha stepped out, the world was empty. No people, no sounds, just wind and stone. They were alone, the last two humans. They wept, not out of fear but grief. What now? So they prayed, not to Zeus but to Themis, goddess of divine law and prophecy. "How do we rebuild?" they asked. "How do we start again?" Themis answered, in riddles as usual. "Cover your heads and throw the bones of your mother behind you. Strange, but Deucalion understood. Mother was the earth, and her bones were stones. So they picked up rocks and threw them behind them. Where Deucalion's stones landed, men appeared. Where Pyrrha's stones fell, women stood. And slowly the world filled again. This new race of humans was tougher, wiser, born of stone, not clay. They remembered suffering. And maybe, just maybe, they remembered hope too. Back on Olympus, Zeus watched. He saw what Prometheus had started, what Pandora had unleashed, what Deucalion and Pyrrha had rebuilt. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't intervene. The world, it seemed, had found a kind of rhythm. There would still be mistakes. There would still be pain. But something had changed. Mortals weren't just pawns anymore. They were players. They had stories of their own. And the gods, well, they weren't ready to give up the stage, because the world was just getting interesting. Time passed, not in years, but in stories. The gods were still watching, still stirring the pot. But now the spotlight began to shift, from the skies above and the caves below, to humans. Not just any humans. Heroes. They weren't gods, but they weren't ordinary either. They were something in between. Tougher, louder, braver, sometimes clever, sometimes doomed, but always unforgettable. And the gods? They loved a good story. Some of them even helped write them. Take Perseus, for example. A mortal boy born of a secret union between Zeus and a mortal woman. Yes, Zeus had many of those. His life was never going to be normal. As a baby, he and his mother were locked in a chest and thrown into the sea. They washed up on an island, survived, and grew quietly. Until Perseus became a young man. Strong, proud, not one to back down. One day, a king challenged him. "Bring me the head of Medusa," he said. Simple. Except Medusa was one of the Gorgons, monsters with snake hair, eyes that turned people to stone, and breath that could kill. It was a death sentence. But Perseus had something most mortals didn't. Allies. Athena gave him a mirrored shield. Hermes handed him wing sandals. He even got a magic satchel and an invisibility cap. Not bad for a guy with no army. Perseus flew far and found Medusa asleep. Carefully, he crept closer, watching only through the reflection. One clean cut, one silent scream, and her head was in the bag. But that wasn't all. From her body rose Pegasus, a winged horse born from spilled blood. Because in Greek myth, things are rarely just what they seem. Perseus didn't stop there. On his way back, he found a princess Andromeda chained to a rock, offered to a sea monster. He killed the beast, freed the girl, married her. By the time he got home, the king who'd sent him to die was shocked to see him alive. So Perseus showed him Medusa's head. The king turned to stone. Poetic justice. Perseus was just the beginning. Soon others rose. There was Theseus, who entered the deadly labyrinth of Crete. A twisting maze holding the Minotaur, a creature with the body of a man and the head of a bull. No one had ever come out. Theseus did, but only because he had help. Princess Ariadne gave him a sword and a thread. The first to slay the beast, the second to find his way back out. He promised to marry her, took her away, and then left her sleeping on an island. Yeah, not all heroes act heroically. Then there was Bellerophon, who tamed Pegasus and killed the Chimera. A fire-breathing beast with a lion's head, a goat's body, and a serpent's tail. He flew higher and higher, trying to reach Olympus itself. But the gods had limits. Pegasus bucked. Bellerophon fell. Survived, but never flew again. Each story echoed the same idea. Mortals could be powerful. They could be bold, but they couldn't be gods. Still, they tried. Meanwhile, Olympus remained dramatic. The gods still fought, still flirted, still interfered in human lives whenever boredom struck. Poseidon created earthquakes because someone didn't build a temple fast enough. Hera sent madness upon women who crossed her. Aphrodite played with hearts like they were strings on a harp. And Zeus, well, he kept finding ways to complicate everything. But not all divine interference was cruel. Sometimes it was just messy, like the story of Pygmalion, a sculptor who carved the perfect woman from ivory. And then he fell in love with her. He kissed her lips, spoke to her, brought her gifts. And one day she blinked. Aphrodite had taken pity. She gave the statue life. Pygmalion named her Galatea. They lived happily, strangely, ever after. Or the tale of Orpheus, a man who played music so beautiful it made trees lean in to listen. When his wife, Eurydice, died, he went to the underworld and begged Hades for her soul. Hades agreed on one condition. "Don't look back," he said, "until you're both back in the light." Orpheus walked. Eurydice followed. They were almost out, but just before the sunlight hit her skin, he turned. Gone. Some stories don't need monsters, just timing. But the gods weren't the only ones shaping the world anymore. Mortals had stories now, real ones. They learned to trick fate, to resist the gods, to become legends not by blood, but by choice. And that changed everything, because Olympus might be high above, but the ground below was rising. And soon someone would come who didn't just want to survive the gods, but challenge them. A hero unlike any before. A demigod. A rebel. A storm. His name was Heracles. His name was Heracles. You might know him as Hercules, that's the Roman version. But in Greek myth he was Heracles. And he was born for greatness and pain. His father? Zeus. Of course. His mother? A mortal woman named Alcmene, kind, brave, loyal. She already had a husband. But that didn't stop Zeus. He disguised himself as Alcmene's husband and spent the night with her. Later that same night, the real husband returned. 2 men, 1 woman, 1 night, 2 children, 1 mortal, 1 not. The immortal one? Heracles. Now Zeus was proud of the boy, but Hera, his wife, was furious. Not just jealous, burning. She hated Zeus's affairs. But more than that, she hated the proof of them. So from the moment Heracles took his first breath, Hera tried to destroy him. When he was just a baby, she sent 2 serpents into his crib. Heracles didn't cry. He didn't scream. He grabbed both snakes, 1 in each hand, and squeezed until they stopped moving. The nurse fainted. The legend began. As Heracles grew, so did his strength. He wrestled lions, outran horses, could lift stone columns for fun. But his temper? Unpredictable. And Hera never stopped watching. One day, as a young man, Heracles fell in love. He married, had children. For a moment, it looked like peace. Then Hera struck. She clouded his mind-eye, sent madness crawling through his thoughts. In a moment of pure confusion and horror, Heracles killed his own family. When the fog lifted and he realized what he'd done, he didn't run. He went to the oracle at Delphi and begged for guidance. "What can I do?" he asked. "How can I make this right?" The answer: 12 labors, 12 impossible tasks, each more dangerous than the last. If he completed them all, he'd earn redemption, maybe even immortality. And so began the greatest to-do list in mythology. First, the Nemean lion, a beast with golden fur that no blade could pierce. Its roar shook the trees. Heracles tracked it to its cave. His arrows bounced off, so he dropped his weapons, fought it with bare hands. They rolled through dust and blood, and finally Heracles choked the lion to death. He skinned it using its own claws, and wore the pelt as armor. Second, the Lernaean hydra, a serpent with multiple heads. Cut one off, 2 more grow. Heracles brought his nephew, Iolaus. While Heracles sliced, Iolaus burned the next shut. When the final immortal head came off, he buried it under a giant rock. Third, the Ceryneian hind, a sacred deer with golden antlers faster than wind. He didn't kill it. He chased it for a year. Then, when it paused to drink, he caught it, respectfully. Fourth, the Erymanthian boar, a massive creature with tusks like spears. Heracles trapped it in snow, tied it up, and carried it, alive on his shoulders. Fifth, the Aegean stables. Hundreds of animals. Years of filth. A task meant to humiliate. But Heracles rerouted a river. Let nature do the cleaning. Sixth, the Stymphalian birds. They had bronze beaks and feathers like blades. He used a rattle from Athena to startle them, then shot them from the sky. Seventh, the Cretan bull. Wild, untamed, breathing fire. Heracles wrestled it down and rode it back like a rodeo from hell. Eighth, the mares of Diomedes. These horses didn't eat hay. They ate people. Heracles fed them their own master. They calmed down after that. Ninth, the belt of Hippolyta, queen of the Amazons. At first, she offered it willingly, but Hera stirred the tribe against him. A fight broke out. Heracles took the belt and left, heavy-hearted. 10th, the cattle of Geryon, a three-bodied giant living at the edge of the world. Heracles killed him, his dog, and the herdsman, then herded the cattle back through scorching deserts. 11th, the apples of the Hesperides, golden, guarded by a 100-headed dragon. Heracles tricked Atlas, who held up the sky, into helping. Atlas offered to deliver the apples himself, but Heracles used his wits to escape and finish the job. 12th, the capture of Cerberus, the three-headed guard dog of the underworld. Hades agreed on one condition: no weapons. So Heracles wrestled the beast with brute strength. No blades, no tricks. He dragged Cerberus into the sunlight, and then returned him unharmed. 12 labors, 12 victories, not just battles of strength, but wit, patience, and restraint. Through blood and trial, Heracles transformed, not from mortal to god, but from broken man to symbol. He was still flawed, still loud, still rough around the edges, but now he was also something more. A reminder that even in pain, there can be purpose. That strength isn't just muscles. It's survival, forgiveness, endurance. And Hera? She watched it all. Still bitter, but maybe, just maybe, beginning to respect him. Because even the gods couldn't ignore what Heracles had become. Heracles had completed his 12 labors. He had faced monsters, outsmarted kings, and even wrestled death itself. But his story wasn't over. Because the thing about being a hero, especially one as loud, strong, and famous as Heracles, is that peace doesn't last long. He kept fighting, kept traveling, kept getting tangled in the world's troubles. Eventually, he remarried. Her name was Deianira, clever, cautious, and kind. But even love couldn't stop fate. One day, they came to a river too dangerous to cross. A centaur named Nessus offered to help. He carried Deianira across while Heracles swam. But halfway across, Nessus turned, tried to run off with her. Heracles reacted fast. Too fast. He fired a poisoned arrow dipped in the blood of the Hydra and struck Nessus down. As he lay dying, the centaur whispered to Deianira, "Take my blood. It's a love charm. If Heracles ever strays, use it." She believed him. Years later, when Heracles fell for another woman, Deianira panicked. She soaked a robe in the blood of Nessus and gave it to Heracles. He put it on. The moment the cloth touched his skin, it burned. Not like fire, like acid, like betrayal. The poison soaked through muscle and bone. Heracles roared, not in fear, but in fury. Not just at the pain, but at the irony. He had survived monsters, gods, and war, only to be undone by love. Knowing the end had come, he climbed a mountain, built his own funeral pyre, and lay down on it. He asked for someone to light it. No one dared, except one man, Philoctetes, a friend, a soldier, a believer. He lit the fire, and the smoke rose high into the sky. That could have been the end, but Olympus was watching, and for once Hera was silent. Zeus made a decision. Heracles had suffered enough. He'd proven himself again and again. So instead of death, Heracles became something more. He was lifted from the flames. His mortal pain burned away. his body reborn in divine fire. He rose to Olympus, not as a guest, but as a god, immortal, honored, forgiven. Even Hera, after centuries of hatred, finally accepted him. She offered her daughter Hebe in marriage, and for the first time, Heracles rested. He had fought for redemption and earned eternity. Down on Earth, stories of Heracles spread. Statues were built, temples carved, children whispered his name before sleep. He wasn't just a hero anymore. He was hope, proof that strength could be used for more than violence, that even the broken could rise again. But his story, like all good ones, opened a door to new heroes, new conflicts, new questions, because the world was changing. Mortals were still mortals, but they had grown bolder. They didn't just worship gods anymore. They challenged them, lied to them, loved them, and sometimes left them behind. The gods noticed, especially Eris. She was the goddess of discord, chaos in a dress, uninvited to a grand wedding on Olympus. She crashed it anyway, and left behind a gift, a golden apple. On it was one word: to the fairest. That apple would become the seed of 1,000 sorrows, because 3 goddesses claimed it: Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite. None would back down. They turned to Zeus to judge. He refused. Smart move. Instead, he pointed to a mortal boy, a shepherd, a prince. His name? Paris. He would decide. What came next would change everything. But that's another story, one of beauty and betrayal, and the burning of 1,000 ships. For now, know this: heroes rise, gods fall, but the golden threads of fate keep weaving. And even in Olympus, nothing stays perfect for long. It all started with a wedding. The gods had gathered golden robes, silver goblets, ambrosia overflowing. A perfect, polished Olympus evening. Everyone was invited. Well, almost everyone. Eris, goddess of chaos, had been left off the list. And chaos doesn't take rejection lightly. She showed up anyway, unannounced. No storm, no tantrum. Just one small gift. A golden apple. She rolled it into the room. It glowed, shimmered. On its surface, one word: to the fairest. That was it. But it was enough. 3 goddesses lunged for it at once. Hera, queen of the gods. Athena, goddess of wisdom and war. Aphrodite, goddess of love and beauty. None would back down. Each believed the apple was meant for her. The argument shook Olympus. Insults, threats, dramatic hair flips. Finally, they turned to Zeus. Choose, they said. But Zeus, king of storms, master of lightning, wanted no part in that. So he passed the decision to someone else. Someone neutral. A mortal. A shepherd. A prince. Paris of Troy. Paris wasn't just any shepherd. He'd been born royal, son of King Priam and Queen Hecuba of Troy. But at birth, a prophecy had warned. This child would bring ruin to his people. So, like many tragic babies, he'd been abandoned. But fate isn't so easily dodged. A kind shepherd found him, raised him, and Paris grew up strong, handsome, and kind. He didn't know who he truly was, until the goddesses came knocking. Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite arrived in a flash of light. They told him the deal. You decide who gets the apple, and we each offer a gift. Hera went first. Choose me, she said, and you'll rule vast kingdoms. Power, wealth, thrones. Athena followed. Choose me and you'll become the wisest, bravest warrior. Your name will echo in history. Then came Aphrodite. She didn't promise gold or glory. She offered something else. Choose me, she whispered, and I'll give you the love of the most beautiful woman in the world. Paris didn't hesitate. He handed her the apple. Aphrodite smiled, and fate shivered, because the most beautiful woman in the world? Her name was Helen. She was a queen, wife of Menelaus, king of Sparta. And now Aphrodite had to deliver her to Paris. The gods always kept their bargains, even the reckless ones. So Paris traveled to Sparta. He met Helen, and she, enchanted or willing or both, left with him. Together, they sailed back to Troy. And in that moment, a spark ignited the dry fields of fate. Menelaus was furious, not just betrayed, but humiliated. His wife taken, his pride wounded, and his brother, Agamemnon, king of kings? He was itching for a reason to fight. So they called the banners, rallied the Greek world. Bring your ships, bring your swords. We're going to Troy. But war, in mythology, is never just about men. The gods chose sides. Hera, still bitter, backed the Greeks. So did Athena, insulted she wasn't chosen. Poseidon joined in too, he had old grudges with Troy. But Aphrodite? She stood by Paris. And so did Ares, god of war. And Apollo, who admired the Trojans' honor and skill. Even Zeus tried to stay neutral at first. But he had favorites. And fate had a schedule. The war wasn't just about Helen. It was about pride, destiny, and stories that needed telling. Heroes from every corner of Greece set sail. Achilles, the unstoppable warrior with a fatal secret. Odysseus, clever and unwilling, tricked into joining. Ajax, huge and honorable. Patroclus, gentle and brave. 1,000 ships, 10 years of battle ahead. But Troy stood strong. Its walls, built by gods, seemed unbreakable. Its people, led by noble Hector and wise Priam, were ready. The world held its breath, because this war would reshape everything. Not just cities, not just kings, but stories, legends, and the line between god and mortal would blur like never before. Back in Troy, Paris walked through golden halls beside Helen. Some called it love, others a curse. Whispers followed them. She's the cause. He's the coward. They've doomed us all. But love doesn't care about politics or war, and sometimes neither do gods. So the pieces were on the board. The apple had done its job, and the greatest war in Greek myth was about to begin. All because someone wasn't invited to a wedding. The war began with drums and sails. 1,000 Greek ships landed on the shores of Troy. A sea of shields, spears, and egos. They came for Helen, but they also came for glory. Among them was Achilles, tall, fast, burning like wildfire, born of a mortal man and a sea goddess, Thetis. She had tried to make him invincible. As a baby, she dipped him in the river Styx, but she held him by the heel, one soft spot, one thread of fate left exposed. He didn't know it yet, but the world would. Achilles wasn't just strong, he was terrifying. His armor gleamed like a second sun. His rage could silence an army. But he didn't fight for Agamemnon. He fought for himself. And for one person more than any other, Patroclus. Not a brother by blood, but something deeper. Patroclus was calmer, kinder. He kept Achilles human, laughed when others flinched, listened when Achilles screamed. Together they were unstoppable. The Greeks set up camp. The Trojans closed their gates, and the war settled into its rhythm. Charge, clash, retreat, heal, burn, repeat. Years passed, and the gods, they didn't just watch, they joined in. Athena whispered strategy. Ares roared with bloodlust. Apollo fired arrows that carried plague. Zeus tried to stay out of it, but even he couldn't resist forever. Every battle had two sides, human and divine. It wasn't just swords that killed. It was pride. It was prophecy. It was gods playing favorites. Inside Troy, Prince Hector led the defense. He was everything a warrior should be. Brave, loyal, tired. He fought not for glory, but for his people, for his city, for his wife, Andromache, for his baby son. He knew the Greeks wouldn't stop. He knew the walls wouldn't hold forever. But he fought anyway. Hector became the heart of Troy, while Paris, his brother, stood in shadow, admired his stolen queen, and occasionally picked up a bow. Hector didn't complain. He carried the weight. because someone had to. Back at the Greek camp, pride exploded. Agamemnon, the High King, made a mistake. He insulted Achilles, took a girl Achilles had claimed as a prize, Briseis. Not for love, not for justice, just to show who was boss. Achilles snapped. He refused to fight. Without him, the Greeks began to fall. Trojans surged. Hector led the charge. The war tilted. No one could stop him, until Patroclus stepped forward. He begged Achilles, "Let me wear your armor. Let the men believe you've returned. They need you." Achilles hesitated, then nodded, but he warned, "Don't chase them to the gates. Just push them back." Patroclus suited up. He looked like Achilles, moved like him, and the Greeks rallied. Trojans panicked. Hector moved to stop him. They met spear to shield. The real prince, the false god, and Hector struck. Patroclus fell. The disguise broke. The truth spilled. Achilles had not returned, but now he would. The grief was animal. Achilles didn't weep. He howled. He tore at his clothes, poured ash on his skin. He refused food, refused reason. His mother came to him. "I'll get you new armor," she said. "Shinier, stronger, forged by Hephaestus himself." But Achilles didn't care about the metal. He wanted Hector dead. He returned to the field, this time not for glory, not for honor, for revenge. And the gods trembled. The war changed. Wherever Achilles walked, men died. He was a storm with a heartbeat. And when he found Hector, he didn't wait. They fought beneath Troy's walls. No tricks, no gods, just fury. Hector knew he was doomed, but he stood anyway. Achilles struck, clean, final, and then he did the unthinkable. He tied Hector's body to his chariot, dragged him in circles. Again and again, Trojans screamed. Andromache collapsed. Even the gods looked away. But grief can only burn so long. One night, King Priam, old, broken, brave, snuck into the Greek camp. He knelt before Achilles. "Kiss the hand of the man who killed your son," he said. "But please, let me bury him." Achilles froze, and for the first time in days, he softened. He saw a father, and he remembered Patroclus. He let Hector go, because even in war, sometimes mercy wins. The war was dragging on. Troy still stood, but barely. The walls had cracks. The people had scars. Even the gods seemed tired. Achilles no longer fought for trophies, or fame, or even rage. He fought like a man with a countdown in his chest, because he knew his time was close. The prophecy had always been clear. If you go to Troy, you'll die young, but your name will live forever. And now Patroclus was gone. Hector was gone. There was nothing left to hold him back. But fate doesn't need permission. Enter Paris. Yes, the same Paris who started it all. He wasn't a hero, wasn't a warrior, but he had a bow and help. Some say Apollo guided the arrow. Others say Paris got lucky. But on a quiet day, Achilles stepped into battle, and the arrow flew. It struck his heel, the only part of him left unprotected. The invincible man fell. The Greeks screamed. The Trojans cheered. And the tide shifted once again. Achilles was gone. But the war didn't stop. Not yet. Odysseus, clever, cynical, always watching, knew brute force wasn't enough. So he came up with something different, something quiet, something sneaky. Plan. They built a horse, huge, hollow, beautiful. The Greeks dragged it to the gates of Troy, then pretended to sail away. left behind one man, Sinon. He told the Trojans, "It's a gift, an offering to Athena. If you bring it inside, your city will never fall." The Trojans debated. Some were suspicious. Cassandra, the cursed prophetess, screamed not to trust it. But no one listened to Cassandra, ever. So they pulled the horse inside, celebrated, danced, drank. That night, as the city slept, a hatch opened. Odysseus and a handful of warriors slipped out of the belly of the beast. They opened the gates, and the Greek army, hiding nearby, stormed in. Troy burned. Screams rose. Temples collapsed. Statues cracked. The city that had stood for generations crumbled in one night. Priam was killed. Paris died. Hector was already gone. And Helen? She returned to Greece. Some say she went willingly. Others say she was dragged. Either way, the war was over. The Greeks had won. But at what cost? Tens of thousands dead. A city turned to ash. Gods divided. Heroes lost. And even those who survived faced journeys far worse than battle. Because home isn't always the end of the road. Sometimes it's where the real trouble begins. Odysseus would wander for 10 years. Haunted, hunted, lost. Ajax would fall on his own sword. Agamemnon would return home, only to be murdered in his bath. The war didn't end at Troy. It echoed through kingdoms, through bloodlines, through time. And yet, in the ruins, something strange happened. People began to sing about bravery, love, loss, monsters, gods. They turned pain into poetry, war into myth. They told stories of Achilles, fiery and doomed, of Hector, noble to the last, of Helen, beautiful and blamed, of Odysseus, clever and cursed. The Trojan War became more than history. It became legend, and legend never dies. The war was over. Troy was ash. The Greeks had won. But victory isn't always the end. For many heroes, it was the beginning of something worse, especially for Odysseus, king of Ithaca, sharp-minded, silver-tongued, a man who survived with his brain more than his blade. He had fought for 10 years. Now all he wanted was home, a quiet island, a faithful wife, a son who barely remembered him. But the gods weren't finished. His journey began with hope. The ships left Troy, sails full, hearts light, but then storms, blown off course, scattered, shaken. Odysseus and his men landed on strange shores, and every shore brought new dangers. First, the lotus eaters, people who ate sweet flowers and forgot everything. Time, names, purpose. Some of his crew tried the fruit and didn't want to leave. Odysseus had to drag them back to the ship, force them to remember. Then came the Cyclops, a one-eyed giant named Polyphemus. Massive, hungry, he trapped them in his cave, ate 2 men by firelight. Odysseus didn't panic. He offered wine, waited until the giant slept, then drove a burning stake into his eye. The Cyclops screamed. Odysseus and his men escaped beneath the bellies of sheep. But Odysseus made a mistake. As they sailed away, he shouted his name. "Tell them it was Odysseus who blinded you." Polyphemus was the son of Poseidon. And from that moment on, the sea god hunted him. Next came Aeolus, keeper of the winds. He gave Odysseus a leather bag, sealed tight. Inside, every wind except the one leading home. "Don't open it," he warned. Odysseus didn't, but his men grew curious. One night, while he slept, they untied the bag. Winds exploded. The ship spun. Home vanished on the horizon. They reached the island of Circe, a sorceress with hair like fire and eyes like storms. She turned his men into pigs. Odysseus, protected by a magical herb, confronted her. She offered him a bed instead of a curse. He stayed months past. Then finally she helped. "Before you go home," she said, "you must visit the dead." So he sailed to the edge of the world, to the land of shadows, of whispers. There he spoke with ghosts, his mother, his fallen crew, the prophet Tiresias. They told him what lay ahead: sirens, monsters, more pain, but also home, if he was careful, if he stayed clever. He passed the sirens, beautiful voices singing death. He plugged his crew's ears with wax, had himself tied to the mast. He heard their song, aching perfect, but lived. Then came Scylla and Charybdis, one a many-headed beast, the other a whirlpool that swallowed ships whole. He chose Scylla, lost 6 men, but the rest survived. Finally, they reached the island of the sun god. One rule: don't touch the sacred cattle. The men grew hungry, ignored the warning. When they set sail again, lightning split the ship. All were lost, except Odysseus. He washed ashore on a quiet island, alone. There a goddess found him, Calypso. She offered him comfort, immortality, endless love. 7 years passed, but his heart stayed in Ithaca. He missed his wife, Penelope, his son, Telemachus. He missed being himself. Eventually, the gods intervened. Hermes came, told Calypso to let him go. She wept, but obeyed. Odysseus built a raft, sailed into another storm, was wrecked again, and finally washed up in Phaeacia. They clothed him, fed him, asked his name, and he told his story, not like a warrior, not like a king, but like a survivor. They sent him home, to Ithaca. After 20 years, he walked through familiar fields, but nothing was the same. His palace was overrun. Suitors filled the halls, men trying to marry his wife, eat his food, steal his crown. Penelope had held them off barely. She still believed. Odysseus disguised himself, waited, watched. Then, at the right moment, he revealed himself. With Telemachus at his side, he took back his throne, arrow by arrow. The war was truly over, not the one at Troy, the one that followed, the one inside him. Odysseus was home, older, tired, but home. And maybe that's the hardest journey of all. Not the war, not the sea, but returning to the life you left behind and finding your place in it again. The war ended, but the blood didn't stop. Not all heroes returned to cheers. Some came home to silence, to betrayal, to death. Agamemnon, high king of the Greeks, was one of them. He had led 1,000 ships. He had taken Troy. And now, after years away, he stepped into his palace expecting peace. Instead, he met a blade. It was waiting for him, held by someone he knew. His wife, Clytemnestra. This wasn't sudden. This was a slow-burn revenge. Because before the war, Agamemnon had made a choice. To win favorable winds to sail to Troy, he sacrificed their daughter, Iphigenia. He told Clytemnestra it was a wedding, a happy moment. Then he killed the girl and left for war. 10 years passed. Clytemnestra waited, not in sorrow, in rage. She ruled the kingdom, took a lover, Aegisthus, and when Agamemnon returned, she was ready. He walked in, smiling, victorious. She offered him a bath, wrapped him in a robe with no opening. And while he struggled, she stabbed him again and again. Their son, Orestes, was in exile at the time. Years later, he returned, torn between grief and duty, because now it was his turn. A god Apollo gave him a command: kill your mother, avenge your father. Orestes trembled. He wanted justice, but did justice mean more death? He wrestled with the choice, visited his father's grave, cried. Then he acted. He entered the palace, confronted his mother. She opened her arms. "I gave you life," she said. "And I'll take it," he whispered. The blade struck. Clytemnestra collapsed. Aegisthus followed, and Orestes broke. The Furies came for him, old goddesses of vengeance, clawed hands, bleeding eyes. They whispered in his ears, hunted his dreams, drove him mad. He fled, screaming, begging. Apollo tried to protect him, but the Furies wouldn't stop. "You shed kin blood," they said. "There must be punishment." So Orestes turned to a higher court, Athena, and for the first time in myth, a trial was held, not with swords, but with arguments. Apollo stood for Orestes. The Furies pressed their case. "A mother's blood was spilled," they said. "There is no excuse." "He followed divine command," Apollo countered. "Should a son be cursed for obeying a god?" The jury of Athenians debated, then tied. The decision fell to Athena. She paused, measured, then spoke. "I cast my vote for mercy. Let this be the end of the old bloodways. Let law replace vengeance." The Furies hissed, but she calmed them, promised them a place of honor, worship, balance. They agreed, and so the cycle broke. Orestes was free, not just from the curse, but from the pattern. The Greek world had changed. Once justice had come by blade. Now it came by voice. The gods were still watching, but humans were beginning to decide their own fate. This was the beginning of something new. The age of myth was fading. The age of men was rising. Heroes became kings. Kings became stories. The gods, once loud and close, grew quieter, still present, still powerful, but no longer pulling every string. People began to ask questions. Why do we suffer? Why do the good fall? What is right when even gods disagree? There were no easy answers, but there were stories, and stories became memory. Memory became belief. Some gods faded, some adapted, some were renamed and reimagined, but their echoes never left. In courtrooms, in temples, in bedtime tales and battlefield prayers, Greek myth didn't vanish. It evolved, because truth doesn't always wear armor. Sometimes it wears metaphor, and even the darkest legends carry a little light.
The gods were still there, but something had changed. They weren't the loudest voices anymore. Not every war was blessed. Not every love was cursed. People still prayed, still built temples, still feared the wrath of Olympus. But now, they also questioned, because the age of heroes had passed. The age of humans had begun, and with it came something new. Memory, not just of gods and monsters, but of choices, mistakes, lessons. People started asking, why did the gods suffer like us? Why did the strongest fall? What kind of world are we living in? If even the divine are flawed? Philosophers replaced prophets. Reason began to walk alongside belief, but the stories didn't vanish. They grew deeper. In Athens, men gathered in stone theaters. They didn't fight, they performed. Tragedy was born, and with it came a new kind of myth. No longer just tales of lightning bolts and golden apples. Now stories questioned guilt, responsibility, fate, Plays like Oedipus Rex explored prophecy and blindness. Antigone asked, "When law and love collide, which do we follow?" Even the gods were characters. Sometimes helpful, sometimes cruel, sometimes silent. The world was changing fast. Empires were rising. Ideas were spreading. Zeus wasn't gone, but he had competition. From science, from democracy, from gods with new names in new lands. Rome would take the Greek gods and repaint them. Zeus became Jupiter. Aphrodite turned into Venus. Hermes found new wings as Mercury. They lived on, but different. Their stories were retold in new tongues, adapted to new agendas. And yet, at their core, they stayed the same. Because Greek mythology wasn't just about gods. It was about us. Our rage, our hope, our failures, our dreams. It explained lightning, and heartbreak, plagues, and passion. People turned the myths into symbols. Athena became wisdom. Ares became war. Dionysus, chaos and celebration. Mount Olympus became more than a mountain. It became a metaphor for power, for distance, for the unreachable. And the stories were passed down, from scrolls to books, from fireside to classroom, from chisel to canvas. Painters captured Medusa's glare. Sculptors carved Apollo in marble. Poets reimagined Achilles. Philosophers debated fate. Even now, thousands of years later, we quote them. We name our planets after them, our cities, our children, because Greek mythology was never just entertainment. It was a mirror. It showed us how we love, how we break, how we rebuild. It asked, what makes someone a hero? Is it strength? Sacrifice? Survival? It never gave simple answers, but it gave stories. And in those stories, we found pieces of ourselves. We still do. In every age, the gods take new shapes. Today, they live in movies, in novels, in games, in songs. Thor throws hammers on screen. Zeus shouts in animated storms. Hades dances in indie games. We remix. We reimagine. But the roots remain. The same fire Prometheus stole, we still carry it. In our questions, in our hunger for more knowledge, more meaning, more connection. So no, the gods didn't disappear. They transformed. From beings in the sky, to voices in our art, in our doubts, in our stories. They whisper through myths, and scream through tragedies. And maybe that's their real immortality. Not ambrosia, not golden thrones, but memory and metaphor. They were never just gods. They were reflections of us. Greek mythology never really ended. It faded, yes, but like stars in daylight, still there, just waiting to be seen again. And we see it everywhere, in words, in art, in dreams. Even if you've never read the Iliad or heard of Mount Olympus, you still speak their names. Echo, Narcissist, Titanic, Pandora. They live in our language. Take Narcissist. It comes from Narcissi, the boy who saw his own reflection and fell in love. He stared at himself for so long. He forgot to eat, forgot to live. Eventually, he turned into a flower. Now, we use his name for people who can't look away from themselves. Myth becomes diagnosis. Or Pandora's box. Pandora was the first woman crafted by the gods. They gave her a jar filled with every sorrow. Curiosity got the better of her. She opened it. Out flew pain, sickness, jealousy, war. She slammed it shut just in time to trap one last thing inside. Hope. Today, when we say opening Pandora's box, we mean unleashing something uncontrollable. But we forget. Hope was still in there, even in the worst myths. There's a flicker of light. In psychology, mythology shows up too. Freud looked to Oedipus, a tragic king who unknowingly killed his father and married his mother. From that came the Oedipus complex, the idea that our childhood desires and conflicts shape us in ways we can't always see. Jung went even deeper. He believed myths revealed our inner patterns. Archetypes that repeat in dreams, stories, and selves. The hero, the shadow, the trickster, the wise old man. They weren't just characters. They were us split into parts. In literature, the gods never left. Writers reimagine them constantly. Percy Jackson brings them to New York. Neil Gaiman rewrites them into modern gods. Even Shakespeare borrowed from Greek tales. Every love triangle, every tragic flaw, every chosen one on a quest traces back to ancient roots. Even superheroes owe the myths a thank you note. Wonder Woman? Daughter of the Amazons. Superman? A modern Heracles. Myth dressed in a cape. In art, the gods are everywhere. You see them in marble statues, Poseidon with his trident. Aphrodite rising from the sea. You see them in paintings. Icarus falling from the sky. Prometheus chained to a rock. They were muses long before the word meant song. Even science nods to them. The planets bear their names. Mars, Venus, Jupiter, Neptune. The stars carry their stories. Orion, Andromeda, Cassiopeia. We launch missions named after Apollo. Send telescopes searching the heavens, as if to find where the gods went. But maybe the real reason Greek mythology never disappears is because it talks about things we still don't fully understand. Love that burns too hot. Ambition that reaches too far. Fate we can't escape. Families that break and bind us. It doesn't try to solve them. It just tells them in big, bold, messy stories. And somehow that's enough. Because deep down, we all crave meaning. We want to believe there's a reason why things happen. Why we fall. Why we rise. Greek myths didn't offer happy endings. But they did offer structure. A hero falls for a flaw. A god punishes pride. A mortal defies death and sometimes wins. There was pain, yes. But it was part of something bigger. Something timeless. So no, we don't pray to Zeus anymore. We don't fear Hera's jealousy or Poseidon's waves. But we still feel them. When we chase beauty, when we fight for justice, when we wrestle with our demons, when we stare at the stars and ask, why? That's mythology. It's not dead. It's in the background, like an old song you didn't know you remembered, until it starts playing again. And you hum along. Why do we keep telling these stories? Why do we still whisper about gods and monsters? From a world that's long turned to dust? Maybe it's because they never really left. They just changed clothes. Look around. The stories are still with us. Every time we root for the underdog. Every time we fear our own ambition. Every time we ask, what if it's fate? That's myth speaking. Not from a mountaintop. Not through thunder. But in quiet moments. In the mirror. In heartbreak. In hope. Take Icarus. The boy who flew too high. We don't have wings made of wax anymore. But we still chase things that burn. Fame. Love. Power. The dream just out of reach. And sometimes we fall. Hard. But sometimes we soar. Or think of Sisyphus. Doomed to push a boulder forever. That's not just a punishment. It's a feeling. When life feels like repetition. Like effort without reward. But Camus, the philosopher, once said, we must imagine Sisyphus happy, because maybe meaning doesn't come from the finish line, but from the push. We see Heracles in every exhausted parent, every person carrying a burden they didn't ask for, still standing, still trying. We see Prometheus in scientists and artists, those who bring fire and get burned for it. We see Athena in strategy, Ares in rage, Aphrodite in longing. They're not just old names. They're patterns, ways to understand what it means to be human. And maybe that's what mythology always was. Not about gods above, but about humans below. How we dream, how we break, how we try again. Greek myths were messy, contradictory, complicated, just like us. They didn't always have heroes win, didn't always reward the pure, didn't promise fairness, but they did offer one thing: perspective. That even the gods struggled. That even perfection cracked. That even death wasn't always the end. They gave shape to the chaos, turned emotion into metaphor, suffering into structure. And in doing so, they gave us tools. Not to control life, but to endure it. That's why we keep telling them. Because we need them. Not as history, but as mirrors. To remind us that love can be destructive. That strength comes with sacrifice. That beauty fades, but story lasts. You can feel it in a storm, in silence, in a choice that hurts. The weight of a myth brushing against your life. And in those moments, you're not alone. You're walking paths others have walked. Not in armor, not in sandals, but in fear, and faith, and feeling. So maybe that's why the gods haven't truly vanished. Because we are their legacy. Not in power, but in story. We carry them in our language, in our symbols, in our struggles. We rewrite them again and again, in every generation, in every voice. Because when we say Achilles, we mean vulnerability. When we say Odysseus, we mean resilience. When we say Medusa, we mean pain twisted into warning. Each name becomes shorthand for something deeper, something we all feel but can't always explain. And that is myth. It's not about believing in gods. It's about believing that our emotions matter, that our journeys have shape, that our wounds aren't wasted, that even chaos can have a chorus. Greek mythology didn't survive because it was flawless. It survived because it was honest. And that honesty still echoes whenever we ask who we are and who we might become. So now we come to the end, or maybe not the end, just the last page of this telling. Because stories don't really end. They echo, they wait, they ask to be told again. Greek mythology is more than a collection of old tales. It's a heartbeat, a constellation of memory. It lives in language, in symbols, in us. Think about how far we've traveled. From chaos to cosmos, from titans to mortals, from gods who shaped the earth, to heroes who challenged the sky. We've watched love spark wars, watched pride undo kings, watched wisdom rise from ashes. We've stood with Persephone in the underworld, run beside Atlanta through forests, held our breath as Icarus fell. And through it all, we saw ourselves, not perfect, not invincible, but human, curious, stubborn, hopeful. The Greeks gave us more than characters. They gave us questions. What is strength? What is fate? Can we escape what's written? And if we can't, can we still choose how we face it? Those questions still matter. We still wrestle with jealousy, still chase meaning, still fear what we can't control. And somehow the myths make that feel less lonely. Because if even gods stumbled, if even heroes wept, maybe we're doing okay. There's a reason we still gather around stories. In theaters, on screens, in pages, on stages. We crave reflection, recognition, the thrill of a world slightly more magical than ours, but not so far that we can't see our face in it. Greek mythology isn't locked in the past. It breathes. It adapts. It waits for the next person to pick it up and tell it in their own voice. Like you're doing now, maybe you'll retell these tales in your own way, with your own rhythm, your own light. Maybe you'll find something new in them. A detail, a feeling, a spark. That's how stories live. Not just because they're remembered, but because they're reimagined. Every time someone wonders what it means to be brave, Achilles wakes up. Every time someone questions destiny, Oedipus opens his eyes. Every time someone dares to love despite the risk, Orpheus sings again. So the myths go on. Through you, through us, through every whispered legend, every painted vase, every line of poetry, and every late-night thought about who we are, and why we fall, and how we rise. Greek mythology isn't finished. It's just waiting for the next storyteller. Maybe that's you. Maybe that's now. So go ahead, light the torch, step into the labyrinth, ask the question no one dared to ask, tell the story again, and again, and again, because as long as we keep telling, the gods will never truly fade. They'll watch, they'll listen, they'll smile from shadows and stars, and we We'll remember what it means to be human.